I was 40 years old and had spent the last 8 years struggling in my stale marriage. My husband wasted his days playing video games instead of looking for work, leaving me to rear our child alone. There had been no sex in 4 years since the night our daughter was conceived. I was starved for intimacy, romance, and connection, and tired of my only sex life being moments I snuck with myself. Looking at the pitiful semblance of a relationship that we'd crumbled into, I said to him, I can't model this. This is not what marriage and love should look like. How can you think this is okay? I can't have our daughter end up like this because it's what she knows. Then I met her, an incredibly charismatic singer-songwriter. She worshipped my bass playing and scooped me into her band. But she wanted more than just my musicianship and began to woo me. I was low-hanging fruit, and she pulled out all the stops, slathering me with flattery and largesse. She spoke of how deserving I was of being treated differently, of how horrible it was that I had so little help from my husband, and told me what she would do if I were her partner. I wanted everything she described. I fell hard and deep, and then I let myself cave. Suddenly there was companionship and romance, and oh my God, there was sex. Sex in the back of her pickup, under an overpass, or in the parking lot at my work. Stolen, sweaty, passionate, thrilling moments. I had forgotten what it was like to make love to a woman, and especially what it was like to be alive. She moved in shortly after he and I split up. For about 6 months, it was amazing. But then one day, everything turned inside out. Suddenly, instead of loving affection, I faced emotional outbursts and unpredictable mood swings. The sex vanished, as did any pretense of partnership. But I thought it was something wrong with me. And if I could just figure it out, I could fix it, and then the magic would come back. I went to crazy lengths. I wouldn't leave my daughter alone with my girlfriend, so I paid for before-school childcare. I squashed the tiny voice inside of me that knew this was insanity and told myself this was a workable solution. Managing the chaos and trying to shield my child turned me into a frayed mass of anxiety and panic. One day, sitting in the passenger seat of her car, following yet another round of her berating and blaming me for all our troubles, I realized that this was literally going to kill me. And then what would happen to my child? The words tumbled out of my mouth as I watched myself speak. I can't live like this anymore. I want you to move out. She exploded. I cowered in fear. She verbally shoved me out of her car and sped off. Then she barraged me with dozens of texts. She called me a fucking asshole, said I was horrible and that I would regret this for the rest of my life. I did my best to ignore the messages, but I couldn't help myself, and I read them, feeling bludgeoned over and over. They dwindled after a few hours and finally stopped. Then I got a new text, very different in tone. I talked to my brother. He's right. I've overstepped. I won't do that anymore. Oh, and my mom is coming down with my niece this weekend to go to Bates Nut Farm with us. It'll be so fun. I'll see you tonight. When I got home, she acted as if nothing had happened. The cycle was repeating, with her both trying to convince me I'd imagined the fight and court me with charm. 2 days later, she was still acting oblivious. I realized I was going to have another hard conversation. I told her, I don't understand why you're having your mom and niece come down. I think it's a really bad idea given I just told you to move. And also, when is that happening? She blew up again. This time was worse. I was so scared, I fled my own house. I called her brother to let him know she was on her way to their family home and that she was extremely angry. We'd developed a habit of letting the other know if she was coming in hot. The last time he'd contacted me, it was following such an extreme fight between them that he had called the cops on her. Hours later, after I knew she'd left for LA, I went home. She'd taken some things, but not a lot. My mirrors were covered in marker. I was not to touch her stuff or bank account. She'd taken my credit card, but only for gas. I could call her, but better not expect her to be charming. Happy Sunday, it ended snidely. Heart racing and with tears streaming down my face, I wiped it off before my daughter could see. That night, I had a tarnished calm in my home. Underneath the quiet was a morass of my devastation. I started receiving contrite texts from her. Several days went by that way. It didn't feel right to cut her livelihood off suddenly as she taught music lessons in my garage. I agreed she should teach some from my place and that we'd work on a transition to her moving. I didn't see my own complicity as I began to slide into the cycle. She came back after 4 days subdued. She expressed remorse over hurting me, hurting my daughter. We were her family and she loved us. She taught for several hours and then wanted to join my daughter and me at a pumpkin patch. We wandered the grounds with her doing all in her power to show me she was going to change. It was nice and familiar. By Christmas, I was caving. She called and expressed how much she missed us. I felt a surge of longing over being wanted. With that, my daughter and I were in the car headed to LA to see her. All there was smooth and even romantic. We took my daughter and her niece to the science center. We talked and laughed. The next day she said, "I'm willing to try medication. My ADHD is out of control. I'm willing to do what it takes to save us." I was so desperate that I had rationalized all of our problems as her behaviors and all of those as untreated ADHD. Suddenly, I had a solution. And with that, she was back in my house. I found her a psychiatrist, one who came highly recommended for dealing with ADHD. She very understandably didn't want to be a zombie. I just wanted the rages to stop. She let me come to the first appointment so I could help her get the right treatment. That she included me seemed like she really wanted partnership. I could help her save us. What I'd endured was going to be worth all the terror and tears. The psychiatrist listened to both of us intently. He recommended a medication that he hoped would even things out without making her lose her creative spark. He handed her a 30-day sample pack and a script to fill. For a while, the pills seemed to help. The outburst diminished to that which I thought I could attribute to a normal amount of interrelationship chafing. She was kinder to me and my daughter. She made more efforts in the house. Sometimes she even put her laundry away. It wasn't perfect, but I had flashes of hope that it might actually be improving. Then the heat began to turn back up. It started insidiously, with random jabs juxtaposed by charm. I never knew what would provoke her and was constantly on guard. My world started to flip upside down again, and again I wondered what I had done wrong. After a year, she no longer wanted to take the medication because it was expensive and she didn't like the stigma of being medicated. She continued taking it, but she fought it and often missed doses. Fearing a reprise of what life had been like before, I took responsibility for reordering and paying for the pills. Finally, she stopped the meds completely. The outburst returned full force, as did the name-calling and gaslighting. I couldn't sleep. She managed to completely isolate me from my friends. I was terrified, alone, and hopeless, and immobilized by my own dysfunctionality. But one day I hit my breaking point. She wanted to bring musicians I didn't know into the house, and I worried about drugs and inappropriate behavior around my daughter. Finally, maternal instinct that I needed to change my daughter's reality kicked in and fueled my resolve. Suddenly it was clear my marriage had been a bad enough model, but this was so much worse. And it was unthinkable that she would learn to view this as normal. It was nearly 2 years after my first attempt at ending things. I made arrangements for my mom to pick my daughter up. I needed to talk to my girlfriend alone, and I knew it would get ugly. We sat in my living room. It took about 2 hours as I struggled for the strength to surpass my fear, for me to finally say, I can't do this anymore. You need to move out. The blast was nuclear. Her words cascaded over me, each landing like a hammer blow. Hate you. Pathetic. Alone forever. Cunt. I sat trying to fold into myself. The next day, she was back trying to woo me. I let her talk, the words flowing over me as I thought, not again. No, dear God, not again. With all I had in me, I repeated that she needed to move. After 2 days, I realized she wasn't going to hear me say I was done. I wanted proof of the conversation between us, so I emailed her while I was at work. I stated in bold letters that I was breaking up with her. I gave her 30 days to find a new place to live, and because I was still enmeshed, 60 to relocate her studio. I hit send before I could stop myself. My phone blew up with threats and insults. I held my line. She posted the breakup on Facebook, decrying me as having done so in email. I didn't take the bait. She threatened to burn my house down. I stayed silent. And on, attempt after attempt, I grit my teeth to stop my words, clamped my hands into fists to not text in reply, and sobbed alone quietly. But I refused myself any opportunity to revert. She still tries to contact me, though thankfully with dwindling frequency. Now months go by between what feel like created excuses to text me. It's been 4 years since I replied to anything. I broke free of the chains we mutually forged, leaving her slack-jawed, holding limp links. She can keep them.
That was Kelly Bowen, everybody.